Okay, before we begin, let's just do a little summary of what we did the other time, what we learned the other time. Okay, so last week we took a look at digital literacy, where we tried to come up with the meaning for some terms in the world of technology, like the term computers, where we defined computers as electronic devices that are able to process data into information. And then we delved into how this data processing is done, where we stated that first, the computer receives raw data, raw information, which is also known as data, or raw set of instructions, which we can also define as data, into the computer for processing, where we also defined or stated some of the devices that help with the processing, where we talked about the CPU, which is the central processing unit of computers, where the CPU is in charge of taking in data into the computer with the help of input devices. So input devices, we have keyboards, we have mouse, we have graphic tablets and all that. So all these help us send data into the computer for the CPU to process into information, and we are able to see this information through devices called output devices. And yeah, I think that's the beginning of that's where we started from last week. Okay, so does anybody have anything else, like something I left out? Something you want to contribute from last week's session? Or let's say you have a question pertaining to our previous session. I'll give you guys like a minute or two to come up with your questions. Does anyone have any contribution to make? If not, then we can start. Okay, so today we are beginning with design literacy, in quotes, graphic design. So graphic design, what is graphic design? So we can define graphic as text, images. We can define graphics as text, images, shape, color, and so on. And design. Design is basically the aesthetic arrangement Okay, so design is basically the aesthetic arrangement of text, shape, images, color, and other elements of design. So first I talked about graphic being the text, being images, being the shape, and all that, and design being the arrangement of those elements. Okay. Today I'm trying to go as fast as possible, but whilst I'm going, please alert me if you don't understand something or you don't comprehend anything I'm saying. But I hope you guys can hear me. Okay. So in the world of design these days, currently in graphic design, there are tools that we work with to come up with the designs you see on social media or in print. And these tools, some of them are Canva, some of them are Photoshop, and there are other softwares, there are other tools that are out there that you can use to bring your ideas to life. But these days, before you can be able to use those tools, you need to understand certain things about those tools or about those software. And those are the things we're going to talk about today in this session. So the first thing we are going to talk about in this session is what we call layers. So this is the first thing we are going to talk about. You need to understand the concept of layers if you want to be a designer or a graphic designer in this modern era or in this current era. So what are layers? Does anyone have an idea of what layers are? Not like only in terms of design, but in other areas of study. Does anyone have an idea of what the term layer means?
Please, isn't it more like a foundation?
Okay, so you can define layer as a foundation. That's not a wrong answer. Do you have any other ideas of what layers are? Okay, so layers in design or in design software are basically transparent sheets of paper. Like that's the simplest way I can put it for you to understand. So let's take these pieces as layers. Let's define these as layers. And in most design software, you see this layers option or the option to use layers. And these layers help you to build up your design from one stage to the other. Let's take a look at traditional media. So before we had these computers and all that, people used to make design from cardboards, cloths with the help of paints and brushes. And one disadvantage of these things were the inability to undo your mistakes. So once you make a mistake on these kinds of media, you had to get a new material and do the whole design all over again. But in this current era, in this modern world, we have tools where instead of having to get a whole new material to make your design on or to bring your ideas to life, you have the options like the undo layers to be able to correct certain mistakes you make in the design. So every time you open, I don't know which design software some of you use, but let's say something like Photoshop. Anytime you open such software, you see a panel, and mostly they define this panel as the layers panel. So mostly you have the name of the layer, the thumbnail of that layer, and then maybe some other information underneath the layer title or the layer name. Okay, so how do these layers work and how do you work with layers? So let's say we have our first layer. Let's use this white as our first layer. Let's see on my first layer, I have this sun on my. Please, can you? I've been muted. Please, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, please, but Mrs. Mrs. mic is muted. So if you can tell her to mute it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes, sir.
Is it better now?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
sir.
Okay. So, like I was saying earlier, I'm explaining how layers work or how to work with layers. So let's say I have my layer one, my first layer. I'm using white to like describe my first layer, and I have this drawing of the sun. Before we had these tools, what I would do is just add or include my other elements on this same canvas. So I'll have my land here and maybe some clouds. And let's say, unfortunately, these clouds were not supposed to be there. So I would have to now change this whole canvas or this whole material and create a new one. But with the help of layers in the current tools we use, you can have another layer on top of this one. So I'll use red for that one, where we'll have our land illustration on it. And then maybe another one where we'll have clouds. And then another layer where we'll have like more details like the tree and all that. And let's say now I want to I don't want the tree there anymore, or I don't want to include the tree anymore, what I can do in that software is that I can now go to the layer that has this tree illustration and then delete it without affecting the other elements or the other illustrations or the other layers. Do you guys understand me up to this point? Or if you have any questions, you can ask. Okay, so those are the bases of layers. Now the next term we want to look at, we'll go back to the layers when I introduce you guys to Photoshop. But that was just a brief description of what layers are. Okay, so the next term we are going to look at is text. So who can tell us what text is or what a text is? Can anyone tell us what a text is or what the meaning of a text is? Okay, so a text basically refers to alphabets, glyphs, or symbols like the punctuation marks we have. And these texts are going to be a sole unit of our design process. And the other thing that we are also going to need in our design process is shape. So you all know what a shape is. A shape is basically a space between an enclosed edge. So let's say you have an enclosed edge like this. This is a shape. This is also a shape. This is also a shape. So a shape is basically an enclosed edge. And then we'll also look at color. So color is basically a hue. I think I should give you guys an assignment to go and look at the meaning of all these three. Because if I say I'm going to take you guys through them one by one, it's going to be a hassle. So, because I don't have time to now come and teach what a triangle is. Or if any of you here don't know what a triangle is, you can just tell me so that we'll look into triangles and maybe area of a triangle, how to find the area, how to find the width and all that. If you guys want to go through that, then I have time for that. Okay, so now that we've listed a couple of elements like the shape, the text, the color, there are also other elements out there. We can also have line. So all these I'm stating are elements of design. Elements of design. So first I mentioned text, shape, color. We have line, and then we have dots. Line, texture, then space. So all these I've mentioned are what we call elements of design. So all these come together to what we define as, all these come together to what we form as a design. So a design must have at least 3 or 4 of these elements. So you can't have a design with just space, then it would just be a blank piece of paper. Because if you look like a design is not basically like flyers and all that. A model of a car, a sheet of paper can also be described as a design. Even a car can be described as a design. So you realize that if you take something like a piece of paper, you can see a shape as an element on that piece of paper. You can also see a line. You can also see texture, or you can feel texture. So that paper, which I described as a design, has 1 or 3 of these elements. So anything that you can define as a design should basically have any or more of these elements in it. And even if you are going to talk about air, you can say that air has this element called space. So anything at all you describe as a design, or anything with these elements can be described as a design. So how do we make these elements work in our favor when it comes to graphic design. So with that, we'll need principles. So what are principles? Principles are basically a sort of rules or a sort of guidelines one must follow in order to accomplish a certain desire or task. So in design, we have principles. We have a set of rules, a set of guidelines one must follow when coming out with a design. And one of the most important ones we are going to look at is balance, hierarchy, and then unity, and what else? There's balance, there's hierarchy, there's unity, there's rhythm, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's look at hierarchy. Okay, so basically what hierarchy means is arranging elements in order of importance. Arranging elements in order of importance. And the reason why this is most important is because when you look at a lot of design these days, a lot of flyer designs and poster designs, most beginners do not make use of hierarchy. So what hierarchy, how you can inculcate hierarchy into your design is first look at the most important detail or the most important info of that flyer or of that design, which one carries more importance. Then you lay extra emphasis on that element or extra emphasis on that thing that you're trying to put emphasis on. Are you guys understanding what I'm teaching? Hello, can you guys hear me? Can you guys understand? Do you have any questions? Yeah, so let me see if I can show you guys some designs and then you guys will tell me if it's making use of hierarchy or not. Yeah, so I was asking, can you see any sense of hierarchy in this design? Okay, so here you can see that the designer laid emphasis to the text Fire Seeds SMAC 2025. So once you take a look at this design, the first thing you're going to see here is the title of the event or the event title, which is the Fire Seeds SMAC 2025. And the next thing your mind or your eyes could go to maybe the dates over here, which is 19th to 23rd December 2025. So from there, your attention could be drawn to either the theme or the venue, contact info, and the payment code. But the main importance here, or the most important thing here, is the title of the event. So these are one of the things that differentiate a good design from a bad design. So a good design lays emphasis on the most important element of that design or what it's trying to communicate to the people. When you go online and you see a design like or a flyer like the one KFC does, you realize that they put emphasis on the food, the image of the food. So that's the first thing they want your mind to come to. And then after that, you see the name of the package, let's say Streetwise or something. I don't know if you guys understand me. I should go more local. Okay, let's say you go to a chop bar. You go to a chop bar, you are going to buy wachi. You see that sometimes the designs they have in front of their shop has this image of foods before you see the name of the food vendor or the name of the food vendor's business on it. So that's how you determine a good design from a bad design. It has hierarchy in it. And also, a good design must have another element called balance. So here you can see that the design here is balanced. So you have the amount of elements you see here are almost having the same weight as the amount of elements you see on the right side. So you can see a sense of balance in this design. So it can term this design as a good design. Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we are talking about balance. Yeah. So balance is basically having the weight of one design, like one side of design, as the same as the other side of the design. So one side shouldn't carry all the weight of the design, and then the other side has like less weight. So if you look at, let's say, a bad design, you realize that the, or let's say, for example, an event design, you realize that the pictures and everything are all pushed to one side, and then the other side is a little bit empty. So that means the principle of balance is not being used in that design. So a design must have all these things. Although there's also something we call exception to the rule, that it's not always that you must follow the rules of design. Sometimes you must go outside those rules to come up with the best design possible. Let's see if we can study another design. Okay. So here you can see sense of balance in this design. So here the designer has placed the text elements on the left side, but if they were to leave this side empty, there wouldn't be any sort of balance in the work. So it would be like all the elements are being shifted to the left and then the right side is empty. So the designer compensates for that with this image over here. So this image balances the entire design. So it won't feel like we have everything shifted to the left or everything shifted to the top and leaving some parts of the design empty. So this element here helps the designer balance the entire work. Let's look at one last one and then we'll continue to another thing. Okay, so the website I'm using is called Pinterest. If you are looking for ideas in your design, so ideas in basically anything, you can just use Pinterest to get ideas from there or references from there. Okay, so in this design, you can also see a sense of balance in the work. And one way you can see that is the placement of these logos. So you have one logo on the left, one logo on the right, and then you have this text over here, and then this huge image here with a blurred version of that image over there. So all these are basic elements, basic principles of designs, basic rules you have to follow to make sure your designs comes out at its best. So the difference between design and art is that with art there are no restrictions or there are no limitations to what you can do. The difference between art and design is that with art you can go all out. You can arrange your text or elements anyhow you want it, because with art you are trying to come up with something aesthetic. But with design, you're trying to advertise something or you're trying to educate people on something or you're trying to put a certain information out there. So that's basically what graphic design is about. With graphic design, we are trying to advertise a certain thing, a certain product, a certain event out there, or you're trying to communicate something to a certain group of people for them to receive that information, but also putting in aesthetics in that design or in that mode of communication. Okay, so the functions of graphic design. The functions of graphic design are, as I said earlier, to advertise, to inform, to communicate, and to warn. Okay, so let me write it here. Functions of graphic design. So we have one, to communicate, two, to advertise, three, to warn, four, to entertain, So these are the main four functions of graphic design. It's either to communicate, to advertise, to warn, or to entertain. So if you have a design or you create a graphic design and it's not having or performing any of these functions, then you need to question your design, or you need to take a look at your design again to make sure that it's at least performing the function it's supposed to perform. So on that design we have, do you guys get anything to this point, or you want to ask any question? Do you guys have any question, or I can continue? Any questions? Okay. Someone should remind me when it's 5:15. Sonata is 5:15. Someone should prompt me. Okay, so let's look at the branches of graphic design. So anytime you tell somebody that you're into graphic design or you're a graphic designer, the first thing that comes to that person's head is that you do flyers or you design flyers. That's like what people have this whole perception of graphic design. They think that, oh, you're a graphic designer, so all you do is you do flyers, oh, with your, you have to say with your flyers, and now, yeah, posters near there. But that's not what graphic design is all about. Graphic design is a broad term, and there are lots of fields or careers under graphic design. So I'm going to list a few. So one of the fields in graphic design is web design. So web design, what a web designer does is that their sole focus is to design user interfaces for websites. So a user interface commonly described as UI. So anytime you see this term UI or UX, it basically means user interface and then user experience. So user interface is basically whatever the audience or whatever the target market is going to see on that website, how the website looks on their devices, how the website, the aesthetics of the website, how the logo is placed, how the text are put on that website. So that's basically the user interface, or that's basically what we call UI. And when we talk about UX, it's basically the user experience, how the website functions, how the buttons on that website functions, how other elements on that website works. So that's what we call UX. So these two come together to form UI, UX. And even under this term UI, UX, you have other things underneath. So we can also say that web design is also a branch of UI, UX. And then we have software design. So you realize that as we are listing like different like branches of graphic design, we've come up with UI UX, and even under this UI UX, there are multiple branches under it. So you realize that graphic design is not just one thing or one task that the person does, but it's a whole broad thing. Sometimes you have people who want to specialize in certain areas, and some people who want to generalize in the whole graphic design space. Okay, so we have web design, we have software design under UI, UX, and then we also have brand design. So everyone knows what a brand is. A brand is basically a representation of a person or a business. So a brand designer, what a brand designer does is that they create logos, they design logos for the business or for the brand that they are working for or working with. So what a brand designer does is they take whatever, or they listen to whatever the client needs. That, let's say the client is starting a catering business, and the client, let's say, doesn't have a name for that catering business. So the designer or the brand designer usually assists the business owner to come up with a suitable name for that brand. sometimes the clients might already have a name for their brand or the name for their business. So once the client already has the name, sometimes you realize that some people have some really, really weird, absurd names for their business, like Jesus is good catering business. Jesus is good catering services. I'm not saying this like this a bad name for your brand or a bad name for your business, but let's be real. This doesn't really communicate or sell out your business well. Let's say if you want your business to like really be out there, like really grow into a big business, you need to consider the name that you're giving to your business. So Jesus is good. Not that it's like a bad thing over. But I see it has like it's like a whole sentence. Jesus is good catering services. So mostly a brand designer would advise the client that we should come up with something simple. It could be a word or a phrase. Sometimes you can just use the client's name or the client's nickname or something. So let's say your name is Rebecca. You can use something like Beck's Kitchen Services or B's Catering Services. Something simple like that. So this would, if your business were to grow into a big multi-million business, it will be something people can remember. And it should be not anything too long where like somebody's trying to recommend your business and you have to type a whole sentence that what Jinyame wholesale and this Charlie. Sometimes you need to take all these things into consideration. So that's what the brand designer does. He advises the clients on coming up with the best name for their brand. Sometimes to some clients as well, they'll be like, this is the name they want to go for. So they cannot change it and stuff. But if you go to a doctor, are you the one going to tell the doctor that, oh, me, I want to take this, I'm going through this, so I want this prescription for myself? No, the doctor will suggest that, oh, you need this, you need to take this for you to get better. You're not going to tell then what's the purpose of the doctor's work or the doctor's job? That means you don't need a doctor. So the client comes to the brand designer, I have this business. So this business is Yomo and Black Paint Barbering Shop. Can you help me design a logo for my barbering shop? The brand designer will be like, also this name that you're coming up with, it won't help your business grow. So let's come up with something simple that people can remember and something that would sell your business faster. So instead of that Yomo and Black Paint Barbering Services, you can go with something like, let's say your initials are B and A, so B and A Barbering Services. So you can go with something like that. And then after that, the brand designer will suggest to you a logo to represent your business. It's some of the logos you see these days, I don't know. Know what they are? I don't know. Like you're trying to put everything into the logo. Like that's what I noticed from beginner designers. So let's say you have this brand name, B and A Barbering Services. And then for the logo, the client will tell you that put scissors. He wants to see scissors in the logo. Then he wants to see a haircut, someone with a haircut on the logo. And also he wants to see the whole barbering shop on the logo. So plenty things into one logo, then it won't even fulfill its purpose of being a logo. A logo should be something simple, something modern. Imagine, let's say Apple, the Apple industry, like the iPhones and stuff. Imagine they said instead of this logo, they're going to use a whole apple tree for their logo. So you buy a phone and then you see a whole apple tree behind the phone. Are you going to buy that phone? You'll be like, oh, this branding is too poor, or this branding there's somewhere. But something simple and minimal. If you take a look at the expensive brands we have out there, like Gucci, Versace, Samsung, and all that, you realize that the logos they use are very minimal. and they don't like contain a lot of stuff. If you look at Nike, for instance, something simple to go with their business. So the brand designer suggests that, oh, this logo is something that is going to help your business sell faster. Because if they see this logo, it will be very easy for your target audience to capture that logo in mind. So next time they see your logo on a brand somewhere or some weird brand, they can tell that, oh, this logo belongs to this business or this logo belongs to this brand. And they can also tell the difference between your original brand and then a fake or copied brand. So you see how simple the Nike logo is. If there were to be uh, another brand or a copy of that brand, and let's say that person uses a symbol like this, you can tell that nah, this one doesn't belong to Nike, or this is a fake, or this what people call banku. So instead of the word Nike, there you see some packages Nikiola on the brand. You can tell that nah, this doesn't belong to this brand. That this is a fake, this is a copy of that brand. So you know that oh, this is not the original. So you can tell that the brand designer of that brand was able to add what we call originality to that business, where people can tell the difference between that brand and then a fake brand. But if you have a brand name like Jinyame Catering Services, and then another person has his business called Jinyame Catering Services, you can't tell, oh, is this the same person I bought from, or is this another like catering shop I bought from? You can't tell the difference because there's no uniqueness in that brand and your brand. So that's what the brand designer does. He helps you figure out a unique name for your brand and also come up with the best minimal logo or recognizable logo for your brand. And also they help you come up with colors. Every brand or every modern brand has a set of colors that they use to identify themselves. When you look at Apple, for instance, when it comes to their online branding, mostly they have minimal colors like white, gray, and less often black. So most of their social media graphics and all that you can see. Okay, thank you, Christopher, for letting me. So most of those brands you can see that they have a set of colors they use. So like I said with Apple, they have um, white, gray, and less often black for their social media graphics and all that. When you look at Spotify, you can tell that with Spotify, they usually use green or different shades of green for their branding. So when you open their Spotify app or you look at their website, you can see the color black and also the other colors like green, lemon green, and others. So the brand designer also helps you come up with colors for your brand or colors that will help people identify your brand easily. And sometimes too, the brand designer also comes with a manual. So let's say the client doesn't want to work long term with that brand. So what the designer does is that the brand designer does is that they create a manual that helps like the client identify the proper use of the logos they create or the proper use of the colors they have, so that in case they are going to work with a different designer somewhere, the designer will know that, oh, this is the shade of color or the shade of green that we use for this design, or this is the shade of color that we use for this brand. So that's what the brand designer does. I think we should end here for now. The next session will continue with where we left off. Does anyone have any questions so far? Any question? Any question? Any question? Any questions so far? But before I end, I want to give you guys an assignment. I want to give you guys a short assignment. So the assignment is you take a look at what you are doing or whatever you are doing, whether it's a business you are trying to run or a ministry you are trying to run, and then you come up with a unique name for that business or for that ministry or that personal brand. So that's the assignment. Come up with a unique name for your personal brand or your business. It shouldn't be Jinyame, it shouldn't be Jesus Christ is Lord Ministries or I have found a working God Ministries or Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior Ministries. Revolution should be something simple, something that people can identify, something that people can recognize. So if it's your business too, it should be something minimal. If you realize that a lot of people out there have like the name that you want to use, you can try and come up with other names. There's AI that can help you come up with those things. There's ChatGPT, there's Gemini. You can use all those things to come up with the best name for your business or your personal brand. Please, is that understood? Okay, so you guys have a week to come up with a name. If you already have a name, so you can just, that means you've already done the assignment. Or yeah. So yeah, like I said, no dramatic names. Something simple, something recognizable, something unique. Before I end the session, I think we'll end at 5:20. Before I end the session, anyone have any questions, any suggestions, any observations, any contributions, any summary on what we've learned today? Any questions? Any questions? I think one time someone asked me if a brand can have more than one logo, like have two logos. And the answer is yes, but those two logos must be similar. So in brand design, we have something called primary logo and a secondary logo. We have primary logo and a secondary logo. Mostly the primary logo comes with just a symbol. Like I said earlier, Nike. So you can say that the word Nike, like the mark, the logo mark for Nike is their primary logo. And their secondary logo is where they combine the text with that symbol. So the combination of these two is what they would use as their secondary logo. So the primary logo is just the symbol. The secondary logo is the symbol with the text. Do you guys understand? Okay, so we'll end our session here. And then I think I should change the time for the next session. So I'll look into that and then adjust the time a bit. So yeah, don't you guys shouldn't forget the assignments, and I'll see you guys in our next session. But before I end it, someone was asking something about the Canva and Photoshop thing, where it said some people use Photoshop, some people want to learn only Canva. So I'm planning on making two separate sessions where we'll have a Photoshop session and then a Canva session. So those who are interested in learning the Canva would learn the Canva separately, and those interested in learning the Photoshop will learn the Photoshop separately. So you don't have like a twist in knowledge of the two and you don't confuse yourself with two different platforms. Okay, thank you guys for joining today's session and see you guys next week.